welcome to the program. We thank you for making the time to be with us tonight. Our conversation is an interesting one. My guest tonight, Nanjira Sambuli. We have Dr. Alex Awiti as well as Joseph Kioko. It's a state of the nation of sorts, especially with everybody focusing, at least the politicians, focusing on voter registration. But what else is going on in the nation? Quite a bit. We'll be discussing that. So I look forward to your feedback. The hashtag is Checkpoint on Twitter. On SMS, you can get me on 22155. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole, and our sign language interpreter is William Silla. Now, we want to start off our bulletin tonight with the race for the top African Union position in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where Kenya has been forced to go back to the drawing board following Chad's latest forays, which are said to be tilting the scale. Now, Senegal is also reported to be gaining ground after its president, Macky Sall, managed to secure the Gambia's support, while earlier he was with the president of Djibouti, which is an IGAD member expected to support Kenya. So how will it go? Let's join our man on the ground, Duncan Hayemba in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, for the latest on this story.
Yvonne, behind me is the Nelson Mandela Plenary Hall. This is the venue where the AU Commission Chairperson's election will be taking place from tomorrow early afternoon. Now, even as the hour draws closer, twists and turns continue to emerge. Latest being information that Gambia, which initially was expected to support Kenya's bid, is said to be drifting towards Senegal, of course, for obvious reasons. Senegal President Macky Sall seems to be engaging more members, even from different blocs, just to ensure that his candidate is supported. We caught up with him engaging Djibouti president to see if he will move to their side. Now, Djibouti is an IGAD member state, and ordinarily you'd imagine that, or you'd rather expect that they will support Kenya's bid. But if what we captured is anything to go by, then Djibouti could as well be drifting towards Senegal. However, when we asked the president, Macky Sall from Senegal, this is what he had to say.
We hope the election will be a very fair election and the best will be win. So I hope all the best for African Union and the African Commission. Thank you very much.
Another factor that could swing matters is the aspect of Anglophone-speaking countries versus Francophones. Of course, countries that speak French and those ones that speak English seem again to be taking that line in deciding on who specifically they will back. Now, ordinarily, the Francophones are said to be having an upper hand, even though three countries, Guinea-Bissau, Chad, and Senegal, have three candidates, whereas English-speaking countries, Botswana and Kenya, have two candidates. So that is also another factor that will be expected tomorrow.
Well, we have put a strategy in place that was very effective, and so far we are optimistic. But elections are elections, they are unpredictable. You don't know what will happen. But we are certain this is the time, it's Kenya's time. And it's not just about Kenya, it's about transforming the African Union as well as being effective in social development for Africa.
Then there is the question of Morocco, which has requested that they be allowed to join the AU hours before that crucial voting takes place. Of course, some are saying that it appears there are certain states that are pushing for Morocco in order to turn tables. We asked Kenyan delegation, and this is what CS Balala had to say. Do you think Morocco will be a spoiler?
Well, first of all, I think the understanding up to last night is let's sort out with the issues of African Union and the issues of the elections, and then we can discuss with the issue of Morocco joining back the African Union.
Regional blocs continue to engage in horse trading. For instance, Nigeria could be supporting Kenya for the AU chairperson's slot. Then Kenya would be expected to back their candidate, who is seeking the security docket. We'll be keeping an eye on how events continue to unfold until that hour when we'll finally get to know who is the new boss for the continent. From Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, my name is Duncan Hayemba. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Duncan Hayemba. Of course, it all happens tomorrow, and you can trust KTN News to get you the whole story on that event on the continent. Now, back home, 3 of the fallen KDF soldiers killed by Al-Shabaab at their Kulbiyo base in southern Somalia have been buried in Isiolo today. The bodies were among 5 others airlifted by the Kenya Air Force plane to Isiolo Airport. 2 bodies were offloaded in Isiolo town, while 1 was taken to Kobesa in Merti. The remaining 2 bodies were airlifted to Marsabit. Isiolo residents and leaders joined bereaved families in receiving the bodies of their loved ones who were killed when their base came under attack on Friday morning. Among those present at the airport to condole with the families were Isiolo woman representative Tia Galgalo, nominated Senator Fatuma Dulo, and Tana and Athi Rivers Development Authority Chair Abdul Bahari. Now, let's talk about what's happening in Addis Ababa still for a moment. In Addis, Ethiopia, President Uhuru Kenyatta held talks with United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres in what appeared to be a move to mend fences over military deployment in South Sudan. The new UN chief told President Kenyatta that the organization wants to restore good relations with Kenya after a dispute that saw the country withdraw its troops from South Sudan. Guterres told President Kenyatta that Kenya was an important player in the region and therefore wanted the two to reconcile. As a sign of confidence, Kenya was allowed to take charge of the Darfur Command in South Sudan. President Kenyatta said Kenya had agreed to a reset of relations and that he looks forward to a meeting of senior officials to work out details about the new arrangement. The Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Union has blamed cartels in the private sector for the slow implementation of their collective bargaining agreement. The union's Secretary General, Dr. Auma Oluga, said they have witnessed a lot of insincerity and secrecy from the government side in the CBA talks. Speaking after a service at a Nairobi church, Oluga stated that they have not received any invitation from the government for negotiations since the court extended their jail term suspension until Tuesday this week. The union is adamant it will not call off the strike.
As can be due, we came to join the Kenyans in prayers and to pray for God's intervention in this stalemate where we have been unable to agree with the government. And we have been prayed for, and we believe these prayers will work as we get the new week, that our talks will go on well.
Impasse is prolonged because of the many obstacles that are being put on the doctor's way, including these court processes, including people who have a very heavy hand in the private sector trying to manipulate the government and the ministry so that the problems are not sorted out, so that they can continue making money and making profits. We still expect to be on court on Tuesday. We shall present ourselves. And for whatever it is for us, we are not really keen on all those processes. What we'll say is that until the country gets back to its soberness and implements the CBA, every other process is a waste of time.
And now let's move to matters drought. Residents of Tiati in Baringo County are still waiting for relief food they were promised by the government. The hungry and angry residents are accusing the government of neglecting them and concentrating their energies on voters' registration exercise. Victor Gale visited the area and tells us the sad story of the effects of drought.
Deserted homes, shopping centers, animal carcasses have now become the order of the day once you set foot in Tiati constituency, Baringo County. On the 20th of January, Devolution Cabinet Secretary Mwangi Kunjuri and his water counterpart Eugene Wamalwa were in Chisakam village, where they issued 5,000 bags of maize, 2,500 bags of beans, 2,000 bags of rice, and 1,000 bales of hay to be distributed to residents of drought-stricken Tiati constituency. However, this is the harsh reality on the ground as locals are yet to receive any food aid.
Jamsada. Hakuna? 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 Hatujaona mahindi yote.
Hata sijui serikali iko hii Kenya ama iko wapi. Hakuna chakula mmefika pande hii. Ile serikali amesema imekuja. Chakula hakuna. Watu wamekufa kwa njaa sana.
The other problem is hunger. The animals are dying. In fact, they are hawezi kufuatilia maana ng'ombe tena. Ng'ombe zimekufa na hakuna chakula. Wanasikia tu serikali wanasema ati tunasikia ati chakula inakuja ya serikali lakini hakuna hajaifika hiyo area.
Chakula ya msaada yenyewe hakuna mali kwa chakula ya msaada. Sijaona chakula ya msaada. Naona vile watu wanakaa tu. Sijaona kama kuna chakula yote imeletwa hapa.
This borehole is the only water source in Kreze village. Due to the decreasing water levels, they have to pump the water at intervals of 30 minutes, where only 3 20-liter jerrycans will be filled before waiting again for another 30 minutes. While darkness sets in, the women are forced to spend the night with their children. Already the area is experiencing an emergence of waterborne and related ailments, with the Kreze Health Center being overstretched.
Water to take drug, proper. I have to send a motorbike to another health facility, not a health facility, to another station. I have to pay my pocket 100 shillings. To pay 100 shillings for 20 liters jerrycan.
4 kilometers away at the Korelat Shopping Center, a Good Samaritan who's a contractor at a local school has decided to help the locals by fetching water for them at the Kerio River 10 kilometers away.
Niliona vile wanasumbuka sana kwa mambo ya kuchota maji. Nakuta kuna damu ambayo iko hapa hivi. Maji ni chafu sana. Kuna maji ambayo kuna madudu. Sasa tukaona au hiyo maji ndio wanatumia kunywa na mifugo pia. Sasa kwa vile tulikuwa tunaenda Kerio River kuteka maji, tukaonelea ili tuwasaidie tu.
Normally at this hour of the day, hundreds of cattle normally flock this Chebelian Dam to quench their thirst. However, due to the persistent drought in this area, the livestock farmers have been forced to migrate to areas near the Kerio River, which is about 8 kilometers from this place. Most schools in the area have closed down as the pupils aid their parents to look for water for their livestock. Victor Ogale, KTN News, Tiati, Baringo County.
All right, let's focus on matters politics in the race towards August 8th, 2017 now. And opposition leaders Raila Odinga and Moses Wetangula today took their mobilization campaigns for the ongoing mass voter registration to Nyanza and Western, respectively. The two leaders asked their supporters to turn out in large numbers and register as voters to send the Jubilee government home during the August 8th general election.
With only 17 days to the close of the ongoing last phase of mass voter registration ahead of the August 8th general election, the Ford Kenya party took its mobilization campaigns to Malava in Kakamega County.
Natakikana kuchukua kura 32,000 ambayo itasukuma kura zenu kufika 95,000. La ajabu ni kwamba kwa wiki mbili iliyopita ni watu 7,000 peke yake wamejiandikisha.
Serikali ya Jubilee imetuchezea sana, imetunyanyaza sana, wametudanganya sana. Ukienda hapa Panipepa, president alikuja akaweka machine. Leo sisi tumepita huko, vile alienda Panipepa ikafungwa.
But even as they campaigned in Kakamega, their counterparts in ODM, led by Raila Odinga, were in Kisumu County, discussing the possible causes for the low turnout in the month-long registration exercise.
That there has been somehow a delay in releasing some of the ID cards which have returned, but also issuing new ID cards for those who have attained maturity age.
On Monday, Raila, his co-principals Moses Wetangula and Kalonzo Musyoka are set to meet with Amani National Congress leader Musalia Mudavadi to finalize talks towards the selection of a single presidential candidate under the recently launched National Super Alliance NASA, a process which analysts argue will largely be hinged on the number of new voters registered so far.
Furahi mkisema wetaenda kuwa president, niko tayari na ninaenda kuwa president, lakini itategemea nguvu zetu. Kilonga anasema Jubilee tawe, Mudavadi anasema Jubilee tawe, Wetangula anasema Jubilee tawe, Khalwala Jubilee tawe, na wewe unasema nini?
By Tuesday last week, only 825,000 new voters had been registered across the country. Muremi Mwangi, KTN News, Nairobi.
Meanwhile, Deputy President William Ruto has accused the opposition of playing divisive politics ahead of the August national poll. Ruto claims that the opposition is busy dividing the country on ethnic grounds, something he says will threaten the country's stability. Fred Moturi reports.
Jubilee. Watatupatia kura ya Jubilee.
Ruto arrived at Ekerubugie-Tai, Nyamira County with one mission, turning the region into a Jubilee zone.
Unajua kuna watu huko Nairobi hawajui, wanaongeanga tu Kiswahili mingi. Wanataka wajue, watu wa Nyamira wamesema hawataki tena hadithi na story mingi.
He addressed several aspirants who will be contesting in the coming general poll.
Hii pressure mnatuwekea hii ni kwa sababu everybody has realized kumbe hii barabara inawezekana kujengwa everywhere. Zamani watu walikuwa wanakaa tu. We are waking up everybody.
The deputy president then proceeded to Kenyoro ACK Church in North Mugirango, where he led the Nyamira aspirants and residents in a Thanksgiving Sunday service following the appointment of Josiah Muriasi as the chief executive officer of the Youth Enterprise Fund.
Sasa hawa watu ambao wanasema pesa ya Jubilee imepotea. Kama pesa ingepotea, tungekuwa tumejenga reli, barabara tungejenga, hospitali tungeshughulikia, kina mama tungewashikilia. Huyu bwana Osoro hapa, Osoro Muriasi angekuwa amepata stima. Hawa watu wafanye porojo bwana.
He dismissed opposition claims that IEBC was registering foreigners in order to win the August poll. Ruto used the opportunity to blast opposition leaders' record in development.
Ile maswali tuko na wao tunataka tuwaulize ni kwamba hii pesa yote Uhuru na Ruto na Jubilee wamejenga nayo reli, wamejenga barabara, wameweka vifaa hospitali including hapa Nyamira, wameunganisha stima imefika 5.6 million people including bwana Osoro hapa. Hii pesa yote ambayo inatumika kufanya hii kazi yote, wakati wao walikuwa wanaendesha serikali, akiwa prime minister, huyu akiwa vice president na ule mwingine waziri, hiyo pesa yote ilikuwa inakuliwa na nani? Singe lazima wajibu hiyo maswali ama namna gani? Hata kama ni kusema imeibiwa, yetu imeibiwa ama ni yao ndio iliibiwa? Because they cannot account. Yao ndio iliibiwa kwa sababu hawawezi kusema walifanya kazi gani. Sisi we can account for the money that we have used as a government.
He exuded confidence that Nyamira and Gusiland in general will shift to the government come the general election. Fred Moturi, KTN News, Kisii.
All right, now KTN News has spoken to a section of commentators who have expressed concern that leaders from the political divide may be balkanizing the country along ethnic lines as they mobilize supporters to register as voters. Though zoning along party lines based on policy and ideology exists in mature democracies like the United States of America and Britain, the trouble with Kenya is that political parties lack ideology and rally supporters along ethnic lines, a factor that has killed a sense of nationhood and entrenched tribalism. Patrick Amimo examines the subject in our segment Spotlight 2017.
Last week, a group of hostile youths chanting pro-opposition slogans thronged the main bus terminus in Bungoma town. These, after word went round that Deputy President William Ruto would make a stop over there en route to Ebuye. Ruto was in Western Region to encourage locals to register as voters.
We've got the political balkanization of the country. so that some section of the politicians are going to this area and others are going to the other area. This, I think, is very unfortunate. And this bridge between the two groups, which are polarized, should be bridged, in my view, by the IEBC. It has to come up to sort of bring them together so that we are mobilizing everybody.
So yes, we cannot deny the hard fact that zoning exists in our politics. And that zoning itself, you realize that it is demarcated around tribal or ethnic arithmetic. The danger of it, even at this moment, is that we risk the possibility of having an election that is ethnically charged, hence emotionally charged.
Yeah. It is very, very unfortunate, and we should not encourage zoning in this country. Surely we should not encourage zoning, because that zoning is anchored on tribe, unfortunately. But I've seen people across communities supporting leaders who come from communities which are not theirs.
Leaders from both the political divide are busy mobilizing foot soldiers to help them to either retain power or form the next government.
Mimi nataka ikifika tarehe 15 mwezi ujao niambie Uhuru ya kwamba mimi niko na tyranny of numbers.
We have also witnessed crowds heckle their leaders as they plead with them to enlist as voters.
In fact, in a democracy, you would expect a few pockets of booing, complaints, heckling here and there. What we do with that is now what really matters.
Of course, there is legitimate dissatisfaction by the electorate on the government service delivery.
The first 2 weeks of mass voter registration has witnessed politicians engage each other in propaganda and name-calling.
We have not seen the opposition, for instance, speaking to how critical their alternative ideas are, as opposed to those of Jubilee, and that it's based on those alternative progressive views that they would want to seek the electorate to support them to form the next government. When it comes to the Jubilee administration on its part, it is missing the boat by the river in its messaging. The Jubilee administration is keenly chastising the opposition instead of telling the people what thus far they have tried to deliver, what they have delivered with their mandate of office, going by a review of their manifesto that they used to get into office, and even trying to explain why there exists still a gulf between that which they promised and that which they have not yet done.
The mass voter registration, which is the last before the August 8th polls, comes to an end in 2 weeks. Some youths appear to lack interest in what is going on.
Mtu mwenye amerejesti kura inafaa pata kila mwisho wa mwezi shilingi 1000 kwa akaunti yake. Tuwezi register kura na tunatoka bure, wanyanya nyumbani wanahangaika bure.
But again, in some areas in this country, there is also an anthropological issue, in the sense that people feel like when you are voting for somebody, you are giving them a job and an opportunity to go and enjoy life. So why would I trouble myself to do that? And so that is creating an element of apathy.
The long-term plan is for us to educate our people and make them have a feel in the governance so that one takes it as a responsibility to come and vote. Because what motivates people to go to register these days is there money for me?
Patrick Amimo, KTN News.
Now, the race for the Nairobi gubernatorial seat intensified today, with contestants coming face-to-face in two separate functions within the city. Peter Kenneth, the latest entrant, attended the same church service with the incumbent Dr. Evans Kidero, while four other Jubilee aspirants, Mike Sonko, Margaret Wanjiru, Johnson Sakaja and Dennis Waweru, attended another church service in Nairobi's Eastlands. All the aspirants exuded confidence of winning the seat.
Si tukipitia huku tunakuta mitaro imefungika, sijui takataka imejaa. Ukitaka kuja hapa ni masaa matatu. Lazima hii shida ya watu wa Nairobi itatuli.
Kujihadhari kidogo, unajua ulikuwa unataka kiti ya president, sasa ukashuka chini badala ya kwenda juu. Na jihadhari kwa ajili ukishuka hapo utatafuta kiti cha MCA.
Nairobi inahitaji kiongozi mwenye ambao anaelewa Nairobi, shida za watu wa Nairobi, chochoro za Nairobi, mitaa ya Nairobi, slums za Nairobi na mambo yote ambayo inafaa kushughulikiwa Nairobi.
Mimi sitaki mtu aniambie Sonko wachia mtu fulani, sitafanya hivyo. Nataka wananchi waniambie Sonko hatukutaki, wacha, nitawacha.
Hii mkono hii ndio ilisign certificate ya Rais Uhuru Kenyatta kuingia kwa president. Si kweli? Alafu hata saizi watu waseme atasakaja wewe haufai ama Sonko haufai kwa sababu ya kabila lako. Hiyo hawatatuweza hapo.
Kama anataka kiti, akuja aongee na raia. Kiti haipatianwi kwa boardroom.
All right, so right here on Checkpoint, we want to remind you to stay with us. We're taking a quick break. You can see my guests. They are ready for the discussion today. I'm seeing a text message here on our SMS line, 22155. You don't leave your name, but you say, where is the voice of women in the discourse? She's right there. Nanjira Sambuli will be joining the panel. Yeah, she's there, thumbs up. So you can definitely engage with us. It's a state of the nation. I mean, you've seen all the political rhetoric, so where are we and where are our priorities? This is the discussion we're going to have. Nanjira Sambuli joins us, Joseph Kioko, as well as Dr. Alex Awiti. You can get in touch with us on our SMS line, 22155, or on Twitter. The hashtag is Checkpoint. We'll see you in just a short while. Don't go too far. Staying with us. There you are.
Literally.
All right, a bit of a technical hitch there, but welcome back to Checkpoint. We thank you for being with us. Our SMS line this evening is 22155, and on Twitter at KTN News, at Yvonne Okwara. The hashtag to use is Checkpoint. We've asked you a question there, and I think it's along the lines of whether you think political leaders prioritize your needs. Well, we're going to try and reset our needs here on the show tonight. My guest, Nanjira Sambuli, who's an advocacy manager at Web Foundation. Thank you. And we have Joseph Kioko, governance expert, who really needs to get on Twitter.
You have to bring it on here.
A little pressure, just a little pressure. And Dr. Alex Awiti from the Aga Khan University, Director of the East African Institute. Thank you, lady, gentlemen. It's good to have you.
Pleasure.
A lot has happened, I think, over the last, week or two. And I want to start with you, Nanjira. There's been a lot of focus politically around voter registration. But just sort of set the tone for us as to where we are and whether we're sort of heading in the right direction, thinking the way we should be.
I think there are multiple ways to look at what's happening. It's very telling that politicians, amidst everything that's going on, amidst drought, amidst a health crisis, the focus is just vote. I don't know how sick people or thirsty people are supposed to vote. And it's wonderful to see the pushback from constituents who are like, well, if you want my vote, I need water. And it's also very tragic that it's basic needs that people have to say. It's not about even, I need, X amount of investment done in this area. It's the basic stuff. In 2017, we're still trying to fight for basic stuff. It is deeply tragic. But I think there's a finger, if you put a finger on the pulse here, I think Kenyans are reaching a point where there's comfort around escaping politics or surviving because we're good at surviving. We're very resilient people. We work hard despite the odds. We're reaching a point where it's not necessarily possible, sustainable anymore. And so it's also an interesting time to look at it that way. But it's also very telling, and I think the question has become for many people, why register to vote? I don't see any sound option. No one is bringing an alternative. That's going to be a very interesting question to watch over the next couple of months.
Voter apathy, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But Nanjira says, it's a focus, it's the fight, basically, for survival at its most basic form. But others in government would say different. I mean, we've just seen the clip that ran a short while ago in our news bulletin. And the government is touting, its development, infrastructure. So where are we with that? How is it that we can be in a country that is moving so far with infrastructure, but yet, people are still starving, 2 million of them?
I think there are two issues at play. The first one is that we are a very political country. We are a country that survives on politics, day in, day out. Public policy analysis or looking at a campaign that is issue-based is a secondary factor when we look at Kenya. We are very political. Now, in the last election, voter registration was not a core issue. But after the voter registration, Mutahi Ngunyi came up with analysis of tyranny of numbers. And everybody knew that elections are won or you lose the elections based on the people that you register to vote. Now, this election, that issue has come to the forefront.
Even though he says tyranny of numbers is
No, it's a lesson that was learned.
Okay.
And nobody wants to be defeated or nobody wants to suffer the consequences of not getting your people to register. You might have the census numbers, but if you don't get these people to vote for you, if you don't get them armed to have voters' card, then you miss this issue, even if you campaign in whichever way. So that's where we are as a country, and it's critical that way. But in terms of issues of the campaign, are we there yet? I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think, my strong feeling is that we are yet to get into the proper campaign mode. People are mistaking issues here. People are mistaking...
Are we not in campaign mode already?
Not yet. Let me tell you, not yet. We've not gotten to that, not
so
yet.
Is it the best or the worst?
We are climbing. We are likely 35 degrees into it, but we will get to 70, we'll get to 80 degrees into the campaign stature. Today, the issues, look at the health issues, look at the health issues that are affecting the country. You don't have, there's no country really that you can go on business as usual and you have doctors on strike. And for 56 days, there are people who are dying in this country, yet you still consider voter registration as the core issue. You have a country where a sizable number of the population is dying out of drought, yet no leader is coming out to articulate this issue or to pause the campaign to articulate these issues and say, this is what we are doing in terms of alleviation of the drought situation. You have a situation where corruption is rampant in this country, and people are not panicking. People are saying, we can live with these ills, but let's now go on with voter registration, because it's a critical element today. Now, that's the crisis in our country today.
Is it the critical element today, though, Dr. Awiti? And please explain to us the nexus between elected leaders, politics, and development, because it does exist. Surely Kenyans elect people into a national assembly to go and represent them, to decide what happens with their money, to basically make decisions on governance and what happens in looking out for their interests. So what's that nexus between that we're missing in this country?
I think there's a historical path dependence to all of this. And if you look at Kenya's politics and how it's been crafted, and all of the structural appendages that support that political infrastructure, it's really about ethnic calculus. That's just how simple Kenyan politics is. It is disappointing that 50, 60 years into independence, we still haven't crafted a basis for competing in a political space that is, and a competition that is driven by an agenda. You boil out the agenda and anything development is incidental. The main core around which we organize is ethnicity. And it's very interesting that when Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Odinga first went out to mobilize, they went to the ethnic stronghold. And now the whole conversation around NASA is this ethnic feuding. How many of Kalonzo's people might show on board, and why does Kalonzo have an upper hand and Raila, etc.? So as Wetangula said, if Luyas show more numbers, then it's going to be either him or Mudavadi. So again, you see the ethnic balkanization on the other side. It's Jubilee, basically an ethnic duo, Kalenjins and Kikuyus, and then everybody else who might come into the thing. So I think that fundamentally it's also a critical failure in citizenship. And I think it's an inability of us to understand what really are our responsibilities. And as Nigeria said, why should I vote? What's on the ballot? If citizens begin to ask that question and basically say, what's in it for me? Right now, we are either trying to give Raila a job as the next president or preserve Uhuru in his current job. Why should it be my responsibility to keep politicians on the payroll? What is it for the citizens of this country? And until citizens begin to ask those questions, then that nexus becomes blurred. I think the citizens must drive their agenda. As Joseph said, how can you have a country where politicians are tone deaf when people are starving, there's no water, there's no food, animals are dying, livelihoods are being exterminated, doctors are out of work, people are dying in hospitals, we had a crisis in education that is still unresolved, we're just about to launch a new curriculum, we haven't taken in the lessons from the last failures of the last 844. So I think citizens in this country have just checked out.
Okay.
But also, not to give up on it, if I can just jump in, not to give up on the citizenship, because it's a cycle. It's a cycle. Remember, people got used to this order of doing stuff. There's a population that is coming up that went through free primary education. There's a population that went through free secondary education that is coming into the demographics of voting. Now, the older generation is dying. The younger generation that is educated and is discovering that truly it's not tribal orientation that will define how I vote, but rather issues and policy campaign. Now, it may not happen overnight, but I have faith that our young people today in this country, those who've gone to school, those who've, and you can see the education opportunities that the people are getting going up to the university level, then they'll be coming out and asking the real question. Really, am I electing Kioko because he's Kamba? Or am I electing Kioko because he brings to the table what addresses my day in, day out concern? We are getting there.
I must jump in as someone who's somewhat in that quota you're speaking about. Yes, we're more educated. We were sold the Soma Kijana mwisho wa kusoma utapata kazi nzuri sana dream. We have studied, we have worked hard, but we're getting into this system that is not working. And so when push comes to shove, you fall back on what's, what's practical. We do not grow up in a vacuum. If in our household, that's what is being discussed, tribe X, tribe Y, who politician X said this, politician X said Y, what happens in the end when the rubber meets the road? And a lot of people are being pushed to that corner right now. You were told to study, you studied all hard. Look at doctors now. When I went to school, being a doctor was the height of it all. I mean, it was the highest cutoff, all of that stuff. Look at what's happening now. So I think it's a bit naive to think that youth will just spontaneously do better because it's not in a vacuum.
Yes, but yet we see voter apathy, particularly amongst the youth. Again, in that story that we aired, a young person saying, well, why should I bother to go out and vote, So there is a bit of apathy there.
There is
but
a
also a sense of tribalism, isn't it? Because even when you take a look at social media, a place where, populated by a lot of young people, persons who've been educated, persons who have exposure and have seen the world, either by traveling there or, the internet has made the world a global village, but yet you can still tell the comments that are going to be made based on someone's last name. And a lot of the people on Twitter, are young people. My mother isn't on Twitter and she's certainly not 25.
Let me tell you, this is where we shouldn't give up hope. Truly, we shouldn't give up hope.
So what do we do then?
The first thing is that we are the good guys who are seated here, because we consider ourselves not to be politicians, must play an active role in politics of this country. Either going and sensitizing the youth to know the critical role that they must play. We must take the forefront of saying, we who have gone to school are going to aspire into positions of leadership, so that when we become leaders, we can change this ball game. Otherwise, we get confronted by people who didn't go to school, who enjoy the politics of tribal arithmetics, and will always excel, and we won't get space in it.
I disagree. This is not about education. Uhuru and Raila Odinga are very educated. Kalonzo Musyoka are highly educated people. Musalia Mudavadi, ethnicity in politics in this country is not about a lack of education. Right. It is about a socialization. It is about the fact that ethnicity actually works in the political calculus of this country. It's not for a lack of trying to push issues onto the fore. We have tried. I believed at the beginning of this election cycle that it was going to be different, until Raila Odinga showed up in Luo Nyanza and Uhuru Kenyatta showed up at the heartland of central Kenya. It changed the whole equation. It is very difficult for me now to go to Nyanza and argue with a young person and say, well, there's something that Uhuru has done and probably merits a second term. It is extremely difficult for me to convince anybody in central Kenya otherwise, to say that Uhuru Kenyatta has basically failed this country and we need to look elsewhere for leadership.
But do you give up? My issue is that
you do not give up.
Okay.
Do you give up?
So you're saying we shouldn't give up?
We can't live in this cocoon of fear. That's because it's our generation.
All right.
And there are people who've gained because we get fearful and we become inactive. But we must keep on asking this question. We must keep on knocking this door.
You should check
we must break this glass ceiling. Because look, it's not the youth that we are going to blame. No. Because the entire society is suffering.
Yeah.
So don't isolate one sector and imagine that they're going to emerge angels of it.
So it's a bigger sphere in which they're being socialized.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we shouldn't give up. We need to guide people.
You're saying let's not give up, let's not, sort of pander to fear, but let's do something about it. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we've stated the problem. So what is the solution? You do see some flashes of hope on social media when Kenyans rise up to a certain cause, to a particular cause, move this country forward. And then at some point, it just, social media also just becomes another cesspool, if you like, of bigotry and tribal and ethnic comments that go back and forth. And that's just social media. And there's a whole lot of young people, old people, middle-aged, and everybody in between that are not on social media. So what do we start to do? I think Dr. Wichi said something about the citizens, and they need to rise up. So how do we do this, Nigeria?
One thing, following how social media has played out since the 2013 elections, when it really started becoming a sort of almost mainstream in the sense that you can get your finger on the pulse around what's happening at pretty much any corner of the country. Granted, it's not representative. Is that these things are being tested. The cohesion aspect is being done now because you find there are people who probably have not even seen one other corner of the country, but are able to interact with people from there. There's a lot of friction, granted, but there's also counter-narratives. When I did a lot of research around this phenomenon that is hate speech back in the 2013 election, we found that for every time, there seemed to be somebody who's trying to agitate people towards a form of ethnic chauvinism or trying to pit communities against one another. There's a strong counter-narrative to that. And that was really, really powerful. Something that you may not see with sort of like broadcast media where it's one to many and not necessarily the many talking back. That said, I think we've also now put ourselves in a box by also framing everything that happens in this country through the lens of social media. We'll be here and we will cite what's on social media. And maybe you have an SMS number, as you said it earlier, but it probably costs somebody. So somebody who's watching this somewhere who wants to participate in this conversation has a different perspective from another part of the country that's not catered for, is not able to be heard. So the politics of representation is starting to shape up, yes. It's a lot about who will be seen where, who's going to shout the loudest, unfortunately. But I think at the core of it is people are just busy trying to survive. People are busy trying to survive. Granted, it's not sustainable to bury our heads in the sand, but given everything that's bombarding people, given the fact that it's January 29th, there are any range of issues that have happened in 2017 alone in this country, which one do you see to a natural conclusion? You say problem, let's work towards solution. Just when you start thinking, another one hits you. And so we're being bombarded, and it could say it's even the system is designed to do that, to keep you disillusioned because there's so many things coming at you.
So you get to a level of fatigue, and, Dr. Wichi, you're saying, the citizens give up. But, to be honest, right now, drought, nurses want to go back on strike, doctors are on strike, lecturers are on strike, the petroleum, truck drivers were on strike, but that was quickly resolved. I mean, there's this a lot to process. Is there for the average Kenyan to say, okay, so let's deal with issue X? I mean, it's just, from all directions.
I think
so what do citizens do?
Democracy is enormously complex. And as we saw in the United States this last election, if you're a white male and you live in the Rust Belt and you're basically waiting for the jobs to return from China, it's not going to happen. And it was easy for Trump to organize around that. In a country like this, where literacy levels are not as high as one might expect. And as Nigeria said, people buffeted by all kinds of problems. It is very easy for people to basically focus on the things that they think are important that basically enhance and sustain them on a daily basis. Do they have food? Do they have a job? So it's basically survival. So it is very difficult for them to be like you and I, who sit at their desks and think about these issues. For them, it's basically responding and reacting to the things as they unfold. And it is in real time. So I think that, part of me says that we have really set up ourselves for something that is grand. But I don't think that there's been careful preparation on the part of enabling citizens to participate in this thing called democracy. And I think we've taken everything else for granted. We've assumed that you can take people to schools and train them to be leaders and the leadership can be learned. But I think we've forgotten one of the most important jobs of being in a country or being in a nation, and that's the job of citizenship. How are we prepared to be citizens, effective custodians of the democratic space, to be able to play in there with sufficient levels of information and ability to ask questions of the political class? I think until we go back to the first space in terms of interrogating that very significant role that we have as citizens, then I think we will be doing not enough justice to this conversation.
And yet we are living in a, we can call it new political dispensation that encourages public participation. You know, we the people, and essentially was to give power back to the people. Devolution for you and I to decide what happens with our money, with our development, that we are able to make those decisions. But yet, you know, here we are, and we're thinking mass voter registration, and that's, you know, top of mind.
I think, first to go to where we are and we're moving forward. Part of our problems, we must appreciate that they're institutionalized, and they've been there over 50 years. This project on devolution, in its own unique way, is part of resolving the problems.
Yeah.
Because when you look at social accountability through the different forums that exist, today people are able to hold the county governments into account, albeit in a small manner. But when you compare it to the national government, people would say, whatever is happening in Nairobi, and I'm from Turkana, I can't resolve it. So the demonstrations will be around Nairobi, but not in Turkana, and then it will be seen as an elite problem. Today, the fact that the governments have been resolved, and you have county government, and there is an aspect of social accountability, because we can say, I saw Kioko come here. Kioko was nobody. He became a chief officer, and those are the principal secretaries in the county, and that guy used to live this way. Today we've seen that he's built a palatial home in his place, and the money that was used to build that place was the money that was supposed to build a primary school. There is accountability, and we must grow our things from the bottom going up. It is painfully slow, but it is structured, and it resolves our problem. I have faith that in the next 10 years, really, or the next election, leave this one of 2017, because it's still being organized on the parameters of 2013, because the actors are still the same. But I believe in 2022, we will have a new crop of leaders. We will have a new dispensation. We'll have 10 years of looking at...
However, Kioko, all of those that we hear today are talking about how they'll be present in 2022.
But
there's people who've already declared their possible candidature
it's
for
fine
2022.
to have ambition. Don't blame anybody for having ambition. I don't think that should distract us.
Okay.
What we should look at is the baby steps that we are doing today, the need to return our elections into a focus-based issue. Of course, these elections will be organized ethnically. There will be consequences that will be suffered. There might be winners, and then the tough questions will be asked. Yes, and I liked what happened in Kirinyaga or in Meru when Uhuru was there, and the people were saying, you gave us promises, and you were not able to see them through. The problem that happened in Bungoma, when the vice president has to divert his way to other areas, it means the level of social accountability exists. So don't give up.
So I hear what you're saying, that, you know, it's nascent, but it's there.
It is there.
And there's something to work with. But I want to pose this text message to you, lady, gentlemen. Nyakwar Andiri from Nairobi says, Yvonne, politics is the underlying factor in our country. Unless we get proper leadership, we shall continue facing these same challenges. We can only change this by mobilization of the electorate with no voter's card to stand out and be counted in this change movement. To a degree, is he not correct? The persons that we elect are the ones that will decide the future of this country.
Right.
So do we bury our heads in the sand by saying, okay, you know what, we can sort of do away with the politics and we as the people can sort of move this country forward? But there is a structure under which, you know, around which we work. And do you agree with him that politics is the underlying factor?
I mean, as Joseph said, we are political animals. But I think what's really also trying to take on the point about citizenship is we have reduced voting to the event, civic education to an event. And so the process is around what we do what have we done between 2013 and 2017 to build citizenship is a question. Now, there are, as you said, examples of where people have held people accountable. At very hyper-local levels, they're fascinating stories. I mean, in Chief Karaoke's sub-location, he's already consulted his constituents around the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and which ones are applicable to them, so that somebody at the county level doesn't decide for them they need water when what they need is schools. So there are cases of that, and you're right about the hyper-local thing. It's just that I don't think the civic education about this new dispensation we have has gone beyond being the event. So there were little pamphlets maybe that were put out, but the process of how that is exercised and how we breathe life to the Constitution and how we breathe life to the institutions we're trying to build, that's the missing link. And so I think it's also a bit tragic to say everything boils down to whom we elect, and not necessarily about who helps us think through the systems and what they allow us to do. Now, that doesn't have to be a politician in the sense of they're running for your vote. The problem is we believe that it's only those people. And so we're trying to find unicorns who will be elected. And we've put in pastors, we've put in, people we said were good standing, but the system is deeply flawed.
Okay.
So we have to find other ways where even when we have good people going in, we're able to cover them because we are awakened to what is in our disposal. So we can have, even if it's in our survival mechanisms, at least 10 minutes a day to say, I will take this call to action. I will organize this way. I will put my voice here. I will, I'll contribute to something. But I think that's what we need to start having a conversation about, because if we keep idolizing the idea of politics and putting politicians on a pedestal, we'll keep having this cycle. And at the rate we're going, we cannot survive it forever.
Maybe to add on a little bit, in terms of the question that was asked, we need to understand that politics, classical definitions of politics, as the art of the possible, politics as determining who gets what, when, and how. It's our daily life. The question is, just like there's no problem in our tribes, because that's what we are. I'm a Kamba, she's a Kisi, you are a Luo. There's no problem with that. But the problem normally comes when we start looking the lenses of tribalism to allocate resources in this country. That's where the problem is. Now, we must demystify that resource allocation paradigm and give it a new parameter of engagement. Otherwise, for as long as it's a blank check, for as long as it exists as it exists today, then the tribal element of organization will always be at the forefront. Now, there's no homogeneous society. And let's not look for a homogeneous society. We'll be divided. We'll be divided on the basis of tall people and short people, fat people, skinny people. We will always be divided, workers and employed. So the heterogeneity and making that heterogeneity within ourselves to work is what we should all aspire to. That's how I look at it. So whatever else we look at, tribalism will exist, but we must minimize its centrality in allocation of resources in our country.
But my sense is that this country is somewhat overwhelmed by politics and politicians. And I think that primacy of politics, the primacy of political processes, the primacy of political cycles as a key determinant of what we get and what we don't get is fundamentally problematic.
All right, Dr. Wiki, allow me to ask you this, because you talk about politics and it being central. So in this country, Kenyans are political animals. They tune into the news every day at 9 to see what who is saying. In countries like Japan, for example, one prime minister after the next, one leader after the next. The turnover in some of these countries is extremely high, yet development continues to happen at a... So, what is it?
I think it's because the institutions are strong. The institutions beneath the presidency, the institutions that undergird the political structure, the epics, which is the prime minister in Japan, are really strong.
Yeah.
And that's the point I was going to come to. Kenya's civil society is very strong, but it only kicks in when there's a crisis. In 2007, they actually got the politicians to sit down and hold their horses and get the country back to its senses. Then they checked out. As Nigeria said, they only organize around the political process. How about if civil society, in all its shades, I don't mean civil society that just does voter education and all kinds of anti-establishment activism, but civil society that builds community assets, that builds community capability, that creates a vital voice of society that then holds government into check, that asks for what belongs to them, that finds out why the road isn't built and why schools are failing and why hospitals are not...
already a number of the Shule Yangu initiative, TISA, a number of those...
But not to a point where it now rides above the political space, in a sense that we begin to invest in institutions. That it doesn't matter who the president is as long as due process is followed. And the Chief Justice is going to do what they're going to do, and the IBC is going to do what it's doing. But right now, this thing is so dependent on who is the president. And I think part of it is also a collusion between the middle classes, especially the ranks of the professionals, who basically are the ones out for the taking when it comes to these political spaces and what people get and what people don't get. And then they aggregate and create an agenda that is highly ethnicized. Because let's face it, who are the people who are benefiting the most from Uhuru's government? Across the ethnic divide, they're the elite in this society. Raila will come in, he'll bring another elite that will be fundamentally Luo, but will have everybody else from other tribes. But the person who really bears the brunt of this ethnicization of our politics and this very strong elite culture that basically protects its own space is the ordinary Mwananchi, whose voice is drowned out, whose water issues never come to the fore.
Right.
And I think that's where we need, as Trump said, the government must be taken back to the people.
Okay.
And how do we do this? This is the fundamental revolution that we need.
All right.
Our value
Revolution,
system?
yes, in our value system. I'll give you the opportunity to just give that in your closing comments. I want to start with Nigeria. So where do we go from here? Some people have suggested a total blackout of politics in the media. Let's not have politicians. Let's not feature them when they speak about certain issues. Might that radical sort of shift or decision spur people into having conversations and taking control? I see Kyoko reacting, and he'll get his moment. Nigeria, what do you think?
Yeah. I know that when it comes then to the media and their job, there's the argument that, but because we're political animals and we'll tune in and we'll watch that. Therefore, the ratings, I mean, the quantitative metrics say, you know, we want this.
Okay.
One thing I think that has not yet been understood by the media that will do well to establish the qualitative metrics. Tuning on the TV at 9 o'clock is probably a culture right now at this point, you know. And when I tune in and you see that as me, you know, as a number and a note that registers, how do you know that I'm yearning for more if you're not listening,
or
right?
what
more am I looking for?
Okay.
The other thing that I think is missing is the contextualization even of that political news.
Okay.
So even if you cover what person X said, how about even just something running as a by-check about a fact check?
Okay.
Because they're throwing all sorts of incredulous claims that they get away with. We're looking to the media in its
the
many
media
forms.
heavily fact-checked Trump.
And not mainstream media.
And continue to do so,
But
even now with all of these executive
the US
orders.
case, there's also, that's a whole other, you know, conversation maybe we should have.
Yeah.
But what I mean is just introduce that culture, because people are being bombarded with what these people are saying, and it remains that. By the time this is framed in context, it's sometimes too little too late. It's probably heavily
So no
textual,
blackout, but
textual formats.
Okay.
And also understand what your audience is looking for, because I think people are yearning for more. It's not necessarily a blackout of politics. Maybe some will say so. I mean, we're not homogenous, as he said. But contextualizing what he, you know, politician X said this today, but in reference to what he was saying 2 weeks ago when he was seeking our vote, it was a whole other issue. And so I think there's a different way to report about politics. It's not just episodes upon episodes, but puts them in a theme and context that will start helping how we also process the political aspect. Because we're not going to stop being political animals today.
All right. Your final thoughts? Just where we should be going, solutions
I think
now?
we are headed down an interesting ride, but I agree with Joseph when he said about giving into fear. That would be the biggest mistake we can make. Or apathy, in the sense that, you know, our own version of, in our own safety spaces, let them eat cake. I'll sort me and mine out, and somebody else will do that. And last but not least, I think we have to figure out how to stop making politicians the institutions. That is the task we have. So if we can use this process to start getting us to think about the elective cycle and our citizenship beyond being the event of voting every 5 years, I think we'll be heading down a better path.
Okay. All right.
Fair enough.
Kyoko?
The two or three issues that I would like to raise. First is the media can't be neutral. The media's role is not neutrality. It's factuality. Neutrality means I will give Kyoko enough time, same as Dr. Awiti. Because then when you do analysis, Kyoko was aired 30 minutes, same as, that's neutrality. But factuality is to go beyond what Kyoko said and do an interrogation of what are you saying. Because when somebody sits here or gets air coverage and articulates a position which is a lie, and the media houses publishes it and pushes it out, by the time you're reacting to it, then you're told, but you're not an authority. Yvonne talked about it. KTN said it. Do you think it would have been a lie if they had said it? You understand? But the media needs to play the factual role. Neutrality truly undermines the growth of our politics. That's a fact-checking that happens in America. Secondly, is a question of values. What are our values? Do we fight corruption because I have no opportunity of being corrupt? Or do we fight corruption because I actually abhor corruption?
Yeah, but we also see other people benefiting from corruption.
That's the point. So
both of us could be in university, but one person gets a job over me.
Yes. So now, when I choose a position to say I do not like corruption, is it because I have not had an opportunity to interact with it? I have not known an uncle who's an MD somewhere who can give me a job?
It's because when I saw Kyoko engaging in it, he never got caught.
Yes.
So I know I can get away with it.
So for as long as we establish rules and regulations, and yet our value system upholds and says that the successful people, all of them were through corrupt means, then our kids will also do the same thing.
Yeah.
So we must go back to our value system as a country. We must show that anybody who engages in corrupt activities, there is a very decisive and a quick action in dealing with it. It is shameful that a person who the entire country has condemned is gunning for a governor's seat and truly looks possible might come back to Nairobi as a governor. That the person we chased out of Nairobi as a thief goes back to Shags and comes back as an MP with all glory and pomp. Now, when you tell me to fight corruption, it means you are demeaning my ambitions of coming back to Nairobi in pomp and glory. So that disconnect really is a factual thing. Then finally, yesterday I had a medical camp somewhere in our area, trying to get doctors to come and treat our local people. And I had a discussion with some 5 dentists. And they gave me an interesting position, that it is not the doctors who are on strike. It is the government that is on strike. Now, I'd never thought about it that way. And they told me, Kyoko, you called us here. We've come here, we've treated 800 people. If the government decides to end this strike, we will go back to do the thing that took us to school and the thing that we enjoy doing most. Those are committed young boys. That is a spirit that we should encourage to people. I really felt good meeting them. And to our soldiers who died, really, let's not politicize a lot of issues. Those soldiers who died defending our country and holding our flag high up there, really, as a country.
Do you think we've mourned them enough, though?
No, we haven't.
I mean, it seems like,
we haven't. We've just moved on.
There's elections going on in another country.
It's really sad that the CDF, I mean, the army headquarters gives a position, then a political figure gives a control position. I think as a country, when we are under attack, when our soldiers are under attack, we must all come together, give the military the first right of information, let them tell us what happened, and if there'll be cracks in that information, give it time. As a country, we must be proud of our military.
Okay,
I think that will be my closing.
Great, thanks, Kyoko. He's talking about a value system. Now, I want to remind you about that study that was done and has been quoted numerous and hundreds of times about young people and their thoughts on corruption and leadership. I mean, you were at the very heart of that study. So when he talks about values, where do you see us with that?
You know, as Najiro said, we don't live in a vacuum. The values are caught, they're not taught. And young citizens have caught the values that we've presented them with. They love money, and they love to make money by hook or crook. They love impunity, and corruption pays. It pays bills, it builds big houses, it buys fancy cars, and it can buy you political office. That's just the fundamental context in which our young people grow in. But as Kyoko said, we cannot give up. And I think the person that really has to step up to the plate is the citizen. It is not for us to turn off our TV because we don't want to listen to politicians. It is for us to amplify the voices of citizens. We must take this country back. If we care enough about this country, this is the time to push these elections to an issue-based election. Let's tell Raila to just hold it and tell Kenyatta to just stuff it. Enough is enough. Tell this country and the citizens what you've done for the past 5 years. Tell this country why you need to be the president of this country, Mr. Odinga. It is not just about sending Jubilee home. It is not just about Jubilee being entitled to a second term. What are the issues? We are really under the weight of taxes. There are no teachers in classrooms. Doctors are underpaid. The police live in squalid existence. Our cities are collapsing. What are the issues that we care about?
Citizens are they angry enough? Are citizens angry enough?
We need to get really angry. We need to get really angry. We need to take back this country. This country does not belong to Mr. Odinga. It doesn't belong to Mr. Kenyatta. This is not Ruto's backyard. This country belongs to all of us. And we must tell the politicians to step aside, and the citizens, we must take charge of this country. And I think until that happens, society must organize around all its resources, including civil society. It's not just about getting people to go to vote and educating us about our voters' rights and how we should vote. It is about claiming that rightful place, which is determining the destination of this country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alex Awiti, Joseph Kioko, and Nanjira Sambuli. I thank you for your time and your thoughts. I just want to read one or two SMSs here. You didn't leave your name, but you said, in Kenya, we need to stop idolizing the political class. How may be the question? My take is we need to reduce the pay to politicians so that we can have doctors, agriculturists, economists use their skill in developing the nation, not sitting on them in parliament. Fair enough. Kabugan Jeru from Sagana, you say, it's a shame that I'm a student and the Kenyan politician takes me for granted and it's time to kick them out. Voters registration is not for the politicians. It should even be self-driven. You didn't leave your name with that text. Here's another one. These are the fruits of our founding fathers who didn't look 500 years after they left leadership. Bad governance to the extent of against other tribes. So those are your thoughts so far. I wonder what you keep thinking regarding the conversation we've had. Any new thoughts that have crystallized? They say it's up to the citizens. Are you ready? Are you angry enough? Or do you think that we're in a good place right now? Because there is room for that thought as well. I will be taking a look at your tweets. Remember to keep using the hashtag checkpoint. We'll be getting to that, and my take is a little bit around that as well. But we also have the number. We've got Lest You'll Forget. We'll be taking you down memory lane, as well as the day's sports news. So don't stay with us. We have much, much more to come.
Thanks.
All right, welcome back to Checkpoint this evening. Now, our number for you for this week tonight is fairly simple. It's just one number tonight. And that number is 56. And remember, this is a number that continues to grow. It'll be 57 tomorrow. So today marks 56 days since doctors went on strike. It's a number of days that doctors have been on strike, and this is an issue that has yet to be resolved. Now, this is what we're doing in terms of 56 days. Now, what can happen in 56 days? The one thing we know that has not happened in 56 days is the doctor strike is yet to be resolved. But we just went on a random ride as to a number of important events, both locally and internationally, that have happened since December the 5th when doctors went on strike. Donald Trump was sworn in, and he, many have said, has fulfilled most of his campaign promises already in less than a month in office, from signing executive orders to do with lobbying, immigration, even Obama the healthcare product plan that was there. Over the last 56 days, we've seen the horrific bus crash at Karai, Naivasha, that killed 33. The nurses suspended their strike, went back to work, and are now threatening to go back on strike later this week. In the last 56 days, petroleum truck drivers went on strike. There was the threat of a fuel crisis in the country. That was quickly resolved. In the last 56 days, we've seen the launch of the mass voter registration exercise. It's now exactly halfway through with about 2 weeks to go. In the last 56 days, Parliament has had a special sitting convened not once, but twice. First on the electoral laws, and then second, to confirm the IEBC and EACC commissioners, rather. There was, during that 56 days, no special sitting that was convened to discuss the doctors' strike. Over the last 56 days, we've seen politicians from both sides of the political divide crisscrossing the country, asking you, the voter, which includes doctors, patients, nurses, to vote for them, to register and vote for them. In the last 56 days, well, a lot else has happened. Serena Williams, for example, made history by beating her sister Venus to make history with her 23rd Grand Slam title. In fact, in the last 56 days, the Africa Cup of Nations got underway in Gabon and is almost halfway through at this point. Within the last 56 days, there was an attack in Kulbio. Sadly, a number of Kenyan soldiers died in that attack. Also, in the last 56 days, former President Yahya Jammeh stepped down in the Gambia. In those last 56 days, Adama Barrow was sworn in Senegal and is now back home in the Gambia, taking the reins over for his country. Now, here's also an interesting thing. In 56 days, a baby who's been born will start to have what is known as a social smile. This happens about 6 weeks after birth. Also, within 56 days, it is hoped that a newborn baby starts to get neck support and hold his head up high. In 56 days, all of these events, locally, internationally, regionally, have taken place. Yet, in 56 days, the doctor strike has not been resolved. That number keeps growing. Tomorrow, it'll be the 57th day. We'll be focusing on matters taking place in Addis Ababa with the AU Commission Chair elections. Yet, in 56 days, this is an issue that has remained dormant while the world has moved on. That's your number for the week. All right, so we want to take you down memory lane tonight on Lest We Forget. So let's take you back 14 years to 2003. There's euphoria in the air. Mwai Kibaki has trounced Uhuru Kenyatta in the election under the unified National Rainbow Coalition. Now, there are homecoming celebrations around the country, until one incident dampened the mood in the country. A plane carrying members of the new cabinet and politicians crashed at the Busia airstrip, killing the newly appointed Labour Minister Ahmed Mohamed Khalif and 2 pilots. 3 other ministers, Raphael Tuju, Martha Karua and Lina Jabi Kilimo, were seriously injured. Dr. Wanjiru Kihoro remained in a coma and died 3 years later. This, at the time, was billed as one of the worst air disasters in the country, and they were all heading, of course, to Modi Awori's home for a victory celebration. Now take a look at his recollection of the events this time.
You know, it was bending. And it moved, and within a matter of seconds, we had a bing bang. We could see, and it went down. I can't forget that. We had to follow. Excuse me.
Emotional, even 14 years later. He is not the only one. The country was also in mourning as a whole. People wanted answers. The government revoked the license of the airline whose plane crashed. They went to court arguing that this was an unprecedented action that had never been taken on any other company following a crash. After an 11-year court battle, they were awarded damages of up to 1 billion shillings in a judgment termed by the company's lawyer as important for the aviation industry. But more importantly, the biggest lesson out of this incident was that politicians or high-profile individuals should never share a plane or indeed a vehicle. Yet sadly, this incident was replicated 9 years later, when George Saitoti, then Internal Security Minister, and his Assistant Minister, Ora Ojode, were killed in a chopper crash while heading for a fundraiser. We surely must learn from history and start to make decisions for the future. It is, of course, important not to forget these lessons. That's your trip down memory lane. Not a very, pleasant one to go through, but that is why we do Lest We Forget, to start to learn from these lessons. And this episode, or indeed edition of Lest We Forget, is just a sneak peek, because I'm sure you've seen that promo coming soon, speaking to former Minister Modi Awori. Well, that is definitely coming soon, and I can tell you here that Duncan Hayemba is working on a story based on those events that we have highlighted today on Lest We Forget. It's something you don't want to miss, and it'll be exclusive to KTN News, because right here we like to take a look at what's happened in the past, remind you of that, and of course also of the lessons therein. So that is coming soon. You want to look out for that one right here on KTN News. We take a break. The sports news is up next. 15-time Kenya Premier League champions Gor Mahia have closed their transfer business after recruiting 12 new players for the new season to help them regain the league title they lost to Tusker FC last season. Kogalo have already started preparing for the new campaign.
After losing out on the league title to Tusker FC in 2016, Kenya's most successful club, Gor Mahia, are planning to start the 2017 season with a bang as they aim for a record 16th title. The 15-time champions recently unveiled 12 new signings ahead of the new season. The squad, which has a blend of young and experienced players, include 2016 Most Valuable Player Kenneth Muguna and one-time Rwanda national captain Jean-Baptiste Mugiraneza, who was signed from Tanzania's Azam FC.
I think we are prepared. We've got a youthful team. If you see most of them, the average age is actually 19. So we expect that they should blend with the older team, whose average age would be about 24, 25, to be able to make an impact in the league.
The club also parted ways with 11 players, including left-back Eric Marcelo Ouma, who joined Georgian side FC Kolketi, striking duo Jacob Kelly and Enoch Agwanda, who signed for coastal side Bandari, Abuba Sibomana, among others.
Yeah, the reason we are going for local players is that we still actually have 4 out of our 5 players last year. We only lost Abuba Sibomana, who did not renew his contract.
Kogalo have lost their pre-season friendly matches against Sudanese side Al Hilal and most recently against Sika United.
I have 12 new players. It's a lot of players. So they need time to enter in our program, in our mentality.
Gor Mahia will open their campaign in the DSTV Super Cup against Tusker FC in what will be the curtain raiser for the new season. Abula Ahmed, KTN Sports.
Ethan Nyachae, Elias Sherman and James Lusa were among the day's top performers as the Kenya National Motocross Championships steered off at the Jamhuri grounds in Nairobi. In the MX85 category, James Lusa was a class above his opponents as he recorded 15 more points than his closest rival, Vince Schreier, who had 40 points. In the MX125 class, Ethan Nyachae recorded 60 points to take the first place ahead of Keegan Kiplagat and Maina Wanjigi. In the MX65 category, Jaden Takunen took advantage of his brother's move to the next class as he took the top position in his class ahead of Neil Wahome and Raf Ghana.
It wasn't the best heat for me. I'm quite disappointed in how I rode. I just overrode the bike. I didn't ride to the ability that I can ride, and yeah, I didn't go how I wanted it.
My first heat was all right. I won, but I had a few problems. My handlebar was a bit loose, so it was shaking quite a bit, but I managed to salvage the win, and it sets us up well for the next 2 heats.
World cross-country silver medalist Bedan Karoki and Irene Jebet emerged victorious in the 26th edition of the Discovery Kenya cross-country meet that took place in Eldoret town. Karoki exchanged the lead with Emmanuel Kipsang from the gun, toying around the huge field before storming into the lead at the 3rd lap. Karoki widened the gaps. He strolled to victory in a time of 29 minutes 54.2 seconds ahead of Alex Kibet and Jeffrey Kipiego. Richard Kimunyan, the World Youth 3,000-meter champion, beat a quality field to bag the 8-kilometer crown. Irene Jebet clocked a time of 26 minutes 28.9 seconds to win the ladies' tie ahead of Lilian Kasait and Eunice Chebichi. World Youth champion Sandra Phyllis Chebet won the 6-kilometer title. All right, so tonight on the show we had asked you whether you think politicians are prioritizing your needs, 90%, or whether do you feel that politicians have totally ignored Kenyans' issues was the question. 90% of you say yes, they have. 5% say no, another 5% say 50-50. Let me take a look at some of your feedback. Samuel Odhiambo says a time has come when the citizens must rescue themselves. Ogacho Okuta says, culture, culture, culture. Until we change our culture for the better, we are going nowhere. Gitaka Mangi says, do bring Ninanjira to checkpoint more often. We definitely will. The Kenyan Dream says this country doesn't belong to Mr. Odinga or Mr. Kenyatta. Kenya is not Mr. Ruto's backyard. You're quoting Dr. Alex Awiti, who said that during the discussion. Tomboy, say, interesting discussion. My take away from the discussion is what Dr. Awiti said. Politicians must step aside and allow the country to focus on issues. Here's one last one. Let me try and find something that's rather sane. Today's checkpoint has to be one of the most sober ones and intellectual. Thank you very much for that one. That's from This Is Johannes. Those are your views. The conversation continues. The hashtag is checkpoint on SMS as well, 22155. We really appreciate your feedback. Thank you for that. All right, it's that time of the show where I give you my take. And tonight, it's about the state of the nation. And on that, there is quite a lot to say. First, it's to the latest madness in town. The premature political campaigns that have cleverly been disguised as voter mobilization rallies. I insist that these are political campaigns because voter registration did not just start in February on the 16th. The law allows for continuous registration of voters, which means that you could easily have registered in December or August last year without any prompting from anyone. If these political leaders really wanted us to register as voters in large numbers, as they like to say, did they need to wait for a timetable from the IEBC? I digress here, but the reason why these rallies now seem so heartless, even callous, is because they have clouded some of the most pressing issues in the country. 2 million Kenyans are currently facing starvation, but the political leaders are arguing about whose base has registered the most number of voters. In fact, the president is on record as having urged the IEBC to follow pastoralists in the arid areas, wherever they go, to make sure they are registered. Hopefully, there is someone else following them with food and not just BBR kids. It's bad enough that people would be starving in Kenya more than 50 years after independence. Never mind that. Just a few weeks ago, we were assured that we had 21 million bags of maize that would be enough for all Kenyans for the next few months. Now, we who pay taxes at rates that are among the highest in the world are being asked to go into our pockets again. Don't get me wrong. We have a moral duty to support our brothers and sisters who have nothing to eat. But should it be an annual emergency? Didn't anyone see this coming? Secondly, doctors have been on strike for close to 2 months now, with the nurses threatening to go back on the streets. Again, that is not important enough. Is it because these medics don't have enough votes? Or is it because no one cares anymore that public hospitals are now ghost towns? Just 2 days ago, our troops in Somalia came under yet another attack. With limited information from our own government on the exact details of the incident that has left more families without their breadwinners. Again, there is no pause in this country to mourn the fallen heroes or give candid answers to the country. Have we become such an insensitive society that we no longer care about the things that are truly important? Why do we allow our politicians to simply see us as statistics and voting machines? It matters little which party you support, but for as long as you allow that party or its leaders to treat you as a vote rather than a human being, there is no real value in casting your ballot. And that is my take tonight. Thank you for joining us tonight and indeed every Sunday night. We appreciate your feedback. It goes a long way into making the show better every single Sunday. Have a good night. Our sign language interpreter was William Silla, and I am Yvonne Okwara Matole.